everybody, Katie, head coach here at Reorigin, where we teach you to rewire your brain and reclaim your health. I'm here with Ben, the co-founder of Reorigin, and we're gonna go over 3 journal prompts to help you rewire your anxious brain. So we all know that journaling is so valuable for mental health, and we just really wanted to dial in on narratives and anxiety and the stories that we sometimes tell ourselves when we are feeling a little overwhelmed or stressed out. So the first question, the first journal prompt we want to offer to you guys is, if you find yourself noticing something or hyper-focusing on something, and maybe hyper-focusing on the negative, or maybe you've been through a situation and you can't help but focus on the bad in it because we're all human and it happens, you might really want to pause and just take a minute to write down and answer, what's the good in this? Where's the good in this? And you know what? It might be the smallest little thing. There might be the tiniest little blip of hope in this thing that happened. But ultimately, because our brains naturally lead towards the negative, we have a negativity bias. They naturally lean towards the bad as a way of keeping us safe. We need to consciously come back online and look at situations that we've been in and ask ourselves, what's the good in this? And even if it is the tiniest little thing, letting that be enough and celebrating that.
Yeah, and this is something we practice ourselves. It's actually embedded into the fabric of our culture and community at Reorigin. Whenever we start a group coaching session or we start a team meeting for that purpose, we always start with a quick round of just saying what's good, right? And it doesn't even necessarily need to be that we're trying to change something negative into a positive, or we don't want to default to what's sometimes referred to toxic positivity of just saying everything is good when in fact it's not.
Oh no.
Instead, it's about taking a step back, gaining some perspective, and realizing that everything is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Everything that might be negative has something that might be a little bit positive, and vice versa. And I remember that when I was really caught in the throes of chronic illness and I had pain throughout my body, and there ostensibly didn't seem to be much good in that. One of the things that really started to help me was to start to ask myself this question of just what's good in general. And that would change my focus, and we now know can actually set up a portion of the brain called the reticular activating system to start to look for and filter for things that are good. And so eventually I found that when I was using this journal prompt of where's the good in this or what's good, I would start to say, okay, it might be true that I'm not going to run a marathon today, or that I'm, have a certain degree of pain or unpleasant things happening, but what else is true? And then your mind starts to look for, well, it's also true that it's a beautiful day out, or I have a delicious cup of tea here, or even the smallest things, but we notice that life is a full spectrum. And at any given moment, out of all of the information that's coming in through the senses, through how we're feeling, how we're thinking, there's also things that are positive and that we can choose to focus our attention around those things too. So I love this journal prompt. Where's the good in this, or simply what's good?
What's good? I love that. I like that you helped us recognize that we also don't have to focus on what's good in this particular situation. It can also just be like, what else is good? I love that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and so the next one is kind of similar in this one, but this one is related to our anticipation about the future, right? Oftentimes we worry, we ruminate, and we think, oh my God, let's say if we're planning a trip, I know this used to happen to me, I would think about all of these things that could go wrong. What if the flight gets canceled? What if it rains? What if I show up late? All these things, and I hadn't even booked the ticket yet. And this is just something that the brain does. It's trying to protect us, and one of the ways it does that is by overestimating the sticks and underestimating the carrots. So that's what you mentioned, the negativity bias. It tries to look for the things that can go wrong to avoid it. But there is a simple journal prompt that we can use to start to retrain that system. And that prompt is, what's the best that could happen, right? So instead of asking what's the worst that could happen, we can actually ask ourselves, what is the best that could happen? Or rather than asking what could go wrong, we can actually ask what could go right. And just as an experiment, start to then journal out what could go right? Like imagine that trip, everything going smoothly. Imagine having an amazing time, right? Because not only is that equally as possible, it's usually the case more often of the time. It's just that we tend to think about the worst case scenario. So that second journal prompt is what could go right, or put another way, what's the best that could happen? Let your mind run wild. Just go with a little bit of, fantasy and play that out.
Well, and I want to add something to that because it is definitely, it trains that positive anticipation. It again turns on that reticular activating system, which is like the spotlight. And oftentimes when we prepare ourselves for what could go right, our brain has something called confirmation bias. So our brain naturally wants to lean towards the thing that are going to prove our thoughts right. So if we're thinking what could go wrong over and over, our brain is probably going to look and try to confirm, yeah, you were right, all these things went wrong. Or if we're thinking what could go right, our brain is going to look for the confirmation of things that could go right. So, and it's fascinating. I like nerd out on that kind of stuff. So you're turning on this spotlight effect in your brain to actually look for confirmation that, oh, you were right. Look at all these things that went right. It's absolutely awesome. Yeah, I love it. And then the last journal prompt to rewire your anxious brain, I love this one, is how do I want to feel? And when we identify, when we're in maybe a difficult place or a challenging place, when we identify, how we would rather feel in that place, it gives us a sense of empowerment. It gives us a sense of awareness, right, in ourselves and, where do I want to be instead of this place? But it also gives us an ability to then kind of strategize and take steps forward to get us to that feeling. We can identify, well, what would make me feel that way, right? Because right now I feel like X, I want to feel like Y. What can I do to help move me towards that Y feeling?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's such a simple step that we often overlook. We just skip over it, right? If we're feeling anxious, especially, it's hard to take that little pause, and sometimes we just go right into action to try and avoid feeling the discomfort, which makes sense. But taking that little step first to say, okay, how do I want to feel instead? Then again, kind of gives us this filter, and our brain starts to serve us with then things that we can do that are actually going to lead to us feeling the way that we want, which might be calmer, happier, a sense of ease, whatever it might be. So these are our 3 journal prompts that can help to rewire the anxious brain when practiced regularly. What are some prompts that you have found to be helpful? What little questions or question marks can you place in your belief systems that can help you to shift gears and calm anxiety and default to a new, healthier, smoother place? Leave it in the comments below and let us know.